Good morning or afternoon or evening or middle of the night. I don't know where you all are, but happy day to you. Thank you for joining us for another Good Tips for Hard Times, where we find smart people who have great advice to help you get through your days. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Anita Sarkeesian. I'm a media critic, public speaker, and the executive director of the Games and Online Harassment Hotline, which is a new emotional support resource for people who make and play games. I'm really excited about today's show. I am not going to be talking the whole time, which you hopefully will be excited about. We are looking to bring on more guest moderators, bring in more conversations and more perspectives into this particular space we have. So we asked Carolyn Petit, Feminist Frequency Radio host, to come on and talk to be a moderator. I'm giving away the punchline, so I'm going to stop myself. Carolyn is a veteran game critic and writer with a particular interest in the stories games tell and how they tell them. Her recent piece on the narrative The Last of Us Part 2 generated a lot of conversation around that game, and she can be heard each week with me talking shit on Feminist Frequency Radio. And then Carolyn is going to be talking with Rokashi Edwards, who is a narrative designer and writer from Toronto, Canada. What up, my hometown? Who loves games and wants to see more people like them progress in the industry. They freelance for a local nonprofit organization called Hand-Eye Society as the director of their annual Wordplay Festival, celebrating writing and words in contemporary games. So I am so excited to listen to this conversation and have you all on this week. Take it away, Carolyn.
Well, hey folks, and hey Rokashi. So right off the bat, I have to acknowledge I am coming to all of you from my crummy little apartment, while Rokashi is coming to us from the Green Hill Zone. Rokashi, how's the weather today there in the Green Hill Zone?
It's crystal blue skies.
Awesome.
It's nice out.
Yeah.
T-shirt weather. I can't ask for anything better.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited just to talk. I'm such I get excited like a little kid whenever I get a chance to talk about game narrative, because, I've been playing games my whole life, and I just think game narrative is such a fascinating topic because, in the early days of games, like text adventures were a really popular genre. So games have always been a storytelling medium, right? But at the same time, there was a period for a while where at least a lot of people thought, well, story doesn't really matter in games, right? It's all about gameplay, and story is just something you have to kind of string mechanics together. Not to discount the fact that there were always games that aimed to tell really intricate and exciting and memorable stories. But I think the past 10 years have really been a really exciting period of development, with people looking at new ways that games can tell stories, and not only new ways they can tell stories, but new kinds of stories that games can tell, and who those stories can be about and what they can be about. Why don't you start maybe by just telling us a little bit about, yourself and how you got involved in game narrative?
I think the way that I, got started with games was kind of an accident, so to speak. It was really weird. I never really went to, actually, I never, not at all. I didn't go to school for, anything games related at all. I actually went to school for journalism. So I did come from a writing background. But I did, I wrote for a couple, local websites that, that covered games, and we would, go to, local events. So it could have been, sometimes there'd be, workshops, game jams. Sometimes I would go to the Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo little mini events that they sprinkled across Toronto, and I would go there and talk to people. But it wasn't until it got to a point where someone asked me, oh, you're always writing about games. Would you consider making one yourself? And I was just like, hell no, that's not, no, please keep that away from me. but at the time, like, I was like very curious of games, and that was like, like mid 2000s, maybe like 2005-ish, where I was a lot more curious about, the things that go into games and the kind of people they represent. And I decided to take that challenge. So for a local game jam, I decided to make a game myself, which was a lot of fun. um, and it was a process that was very new to me. I used the Twine engine for one, so I love narrative folks if they know about Twine. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just
Um,
briefly, talk about what Twine is, because
yeah.
Twine, I think, is part of. I think that, again, as I said, like the past 10 years have been a really exciting period for narrative development. Twine has been a big part of that because it's a tool that kind of gives everyone the power to create their own game narratives, and
Mm,
in a way, you can do really complex things with it, but it also
exactly.
allows for a kind of back to, I mentioned text adventures in earlier. It also allows for kind of back to basics, like if you want to get just down to like nitty gritty fundamentals, like what is good storytelling in games. It really allows you to focus on that as well.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
so cool. So
Y-
you use Twine
Yeah.
your game. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I used Twine, which the learning curve was actually pretty fun. It was really interesting just to, for me to just like type something in and then, just connect it to something else, and it just worked. And I'd be like, I'm a game designer now. Like, it's that easy. So like it definitely wasn't um sort of like a gatekeeping program that was like had a very steep learning curve, that made like, newer creators want to stay away. But yeah, I did make the game. A lot of people have played it. It's been at Indiecade. It's been like GamerX and a couple other places local in Toronto. But I made the game. I'm Fine, and
Mm.
it's a narrative about someone going through, they're going through their life. They're they have like mental health issues, and it's like kind of how they interact with their friends, how they interact with themselves, and that sort of stuff. So that was the first game I made, and I was very nervous about sharing a game with that sort of tone, that sort of like energy. But I thought it was very important for me to make it at the time. And also, it came to the point where I was like, it's very important for me to share that kind of game. So I kind of put it out there, and a lot of people played it. Way more people than I thought. I thought just like a handful of people were going to play it, and I don't really check the analytics anymore, but like probably over like 20,000 people
Mm.
have played it.
Mm.
And I was like floored because I never thought, something like that, like a number that high could be for someone who, just made their first game. And it was just like,
Yeah.
it's still pretty amazing feeling.
Absolutely. And I think, a big part of, I mean, I mentioned this past 10 years as being this really exciting period in game development, and it's exciting for a few reasons. It's exciting to me as a player and a critic and a lifelong, lover of games, because you're seeing games do new things mechanically to tell stories. I mean, when I think about storytelling in games, it's so fascinating and so complex because unlike film, where you can tell all kinds of stories in film, for instance, but
Mm,
the approach, there's like a standard kind of screenplay format, and like the basic mechanism for how the story is told is kind of the same each time. In games, the kind of game you're playing or designing totally changes how the story is told, right? Like a game like Gone Home, which is a first-person exploration game, has to tell its story in a completely different way from something like, let's say, Spiritfarer, which is this new like management sim that also tries to tell this really, moving, involving story. But, the mechanics of the game are so different, and they dictate a completely different way that the story is told. But also meshed with that has been this explosion, or this kind of pushback against like, well, who are games about? Who do they tell stories about? And like, what, like, who do they center? And obviously, like, I think it started largely in a lot of ways from the margins, using people, individuals like yourself, using tools like Twine to say like, hey, my experiences are worth having games designed around them too. My identity is worth having games designed around it too, right? And I think, now, in mainstream AAA games, et cetera, you're starting to see this kind of like the fact that like, 90% of games like star like a grizzled, violent white man is maybe like starting to shift and stuff like that. But I really think it started in a lot of ways from people on the margins kind of carving out these spaces for themselves. So anyway, like, I guess when you have an opportunity, because again, like, all this stuff is so complicated and it's easy to get lost in the weeds about it. When you have an opportunity to talk to people about, like, as you do here, about like game narrative, what's like most important to you? Where do you like to start? What do you like to talk to people about? Let me also, real quick, let me say, hey folks, if you have questions for Rokashi, put them in chat and we will, try to work some of those into our conversation. But anyway, yeah, like what for you is like the fundamentals, or where you like to start talking about game narrative?
For me, it's kind of weird. Sometimes for me, since the default is like so white, and sometimes it could be very, the kind of things that they do is like very like mundane. So sometimes I have this idea in my head. It's like, what if we have, more games that feature, people of color doing mundane things? Like, why is that something that's not necessarily like explored? We have games about, these dudes, they're just, living their life, and they're just like out there having fun. And it's like, why can't, people of color have those sort of like tales about their lives as well? Like, what kind of cultures do they come from? What do they look like? What kind of like hobbies does that reflect from their communities and to the person itself? I think those are like very interesting things that not a lot of people, mostly AAA, they just don't. Honestly, I don't think they give a shit. AAA doesn't care. I mean, I have seen a lot of things that are getting better, but I feel like there's still a long way to go in terms of like, having, characters that, look like me and, have the same interests as me and just doing, fun things. And that should be a thing that should be explored as well. I think once people realize that, like, hey, like, there's a lot of people out there who do like very weird things, but like in different ways because of like of different cultures, different aspects of their life, it could become a lot more relatable. And that kind of like breaks down the barrier of like, oh, this person is different from me, but why are they different from me? And you could see those like very clearly. And I think a lot of people need to like experience that, because that's a big thing to me. I like playing games with people who look like me, but I gotta say that list is not that long.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely, games are. I think the word empathy maybe is overused, right? And I understand the pushback sometimes against the use of that word, but I do think that there is something powerful and meaningful when games, ask us to step into the shoes and the life of people who, who are different from us. It's very like, humanizing, right? And I mean, that's part of why feminist frequency as an organization has been such a strong advocate for more games that center women, and not women as like sex objects for the consumption of the male player, but women as people that the player like actually inhabits and like relates to, and how important that is. But obviously, like, these things they don't just matter across lines of gender. That, like, there's a whole world of culture and experience and stuff to be explored by games. And it's I remember playing Papawiyo many years ago, and how wonderful it was to be in a world that in an environment that I knew was like home, for so many people, but was just a place that AAA games and the games I'd played my entire life had never even like explored or touched upon. Rokashi, why don't you tell us a bit about, you are involved with something called the Wordplay Festival.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is the Wordplay Festival, and what is that all about?
Well, so the Wordplay Festival is part of, one part of many events that the Hand-Eye Society, which is a local nonprofit video game arts organization I work for, is a part of. So, like, we do so many things. We do things like, Comics X Games, which is an event we host with the Toronto Public Library, where we get a lot of, we try to like find games that blur the line between like comics and games, and have like everything in between, like tabletops and stuff like that. And we just have like a huge, it's a very big area within the library itself, and it's usually hosted with Toronto Comics and Arts Festival. So we do partner up with them, and we do showcase a lot of those games. Wordplay on its own is very dedicated to like words and like stories and like those kind of games that talk about those kind of experiences. And I have to say, like, I've been working with the Hand-Eye Society for I think it's been like 2 years now, which is pretty wild to me. And the games that show up for Wordplay are always just like they're so jaw. See, I can't even talk right. They're very like jaw dropping. Like they feature so many like marginalized folks. Like we have indigenous stories, we have Black stories, we have stories about like Asian folks, about like all these different cultures, and all these different kinds of characters have their own little stories, and then we take those stories and we showcase them by taking over one of like the it is basically like the biggest library in Toronto. We have speakers, we have workshops, arcades, we have so many things, and it's really it's really amazing. It's definitely one of my favorite events that we run, because there's so many games that we showcase. And one of the best parts about Wordplay is that Hand-Eye Society also pays. So we pay our speakers, we pay like artists to showcase their games, and even this year we're paying for commission games. So if there's someone out there who wants to like make a game, if they want to submit a game, it doesn't even have to be your game. You could submit someone else's game if you want. I personally think everyone's game is worth looking at. It's really great. Like I don't know how else to like describe it. It's like we want to be able to showcase these kind of stories in a way that's very accessible. A lot of these games are very accessible as well. Like they're usually like point and click, or sometimes they have like they use like controllers, but they're very simplified controls, so they're very easy to pick up and play for a lot of people. And we like those kind of games as well. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think we need as much advocacy and action as we can get around the idea, like anything that centers or lifts up games that tell stories about, from perspectives and about people that have historically, been kind of marginalized or not, not centered in games. Like, so is the festival something like, how would people find out more or like go about submitting games to the festival if that's something they were interested in?
Yeah, for sure. If they were interested, they just got to go to handeyesociety.com /wordplay, and everything you need to know is right there. The deadlines are August 31st, so they do have a couple days. But we love seeing the games that come in, and they're just incredible. Yeah.
So beyond like maybe just opening up Twine, and fiddling around with it, and trying to tell your own story with Twine, do you have like suggestions, things you would maybe, if people are interested in getting into game narrative, things that maybe they should do, or what do you think, what do you want to see happen, also in games narrative more largely? Like what are some things you think maybe have to change in terms of the way the status quo is right now?
For me, the biggest thing that I don't like is like I don't like seeing people get left behind. There are so many people who have like wonderful talent in like writing, creating music, art, and they don't necessarily have, a space or people to talk to in order to, find out more about like all these sort of like opportunities, like initiatives that like are reaching out to those kind of people to make sure that their work is heard. If I could like tell a story real quick,
please.
There was so in Toronto, there was an event hosted by Ubisoft Toronto, and it was the Black Game Pros Mixer, and basically had a lot of like Black folks from all different disciplines come in and just like hang out, talk to each other, learn something new. It was a really fun event. It was really amazing to see like a room full of people in games, like talking about the things they do, the things the thing they've done, the thing they've worked on, and stuff like that. But there was a point like I was just like talking to some friends, and I overheard some people behind me in a group, like a small group behind me, just talking about like they didn't know about like this initiative, they didn't know about this, and they're wondering why no one reached out to them. And I don't like that, actually like really pisses me off. I don't like hearing about people who like don't know about these sort of like initiatives. So I kind of like had to like cut that conversation I was having with my friends like short and turn around and be like, listen, here's what you do. Like they're like, I had to like tell them, like resources like around Toronto that they're very easily accessible, non-paid, that they should know about. I had to tell them about itch.io, where they could like host their games for free. I had to tell them about like talking to people who run like certain organizations who would be more than happy to like like tweet out your game and be like, hey, this is a game you should play. This game features this sort of this topic that I think nobody seems to be like aware of, and I think a lot of people would like that. So I kind of like shifted my time from like socializing to like educating these folks who were getting left behind and not having their work in front of people who who deserve to play those games and like learn about these experiences. And it was just a really frustrating sort of thing to see.
I mean, absolutely. And I think it seems to me maybe the problem is twofold. One is just people, not having a good way of being aware of the resources that are out there to, to maybe help them. But also I feel like, and maybe this is different in Toronto than it is here in the States, I don't know really. But I also feel like there needs to be so much more, and I wish there was more of this coming from big corporations and big, publishers, more of that, like advocacy and outreach and those resources made available to
Exactly.
folks. So I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Are there good ways, say a person is wanting to break into games narrative, but they're not aware of what might be out there available to them. I mean, are there resources on the internet or places they can go to, like, find out what might be out there to help them, or what do you recommend for that person who's like, I really want to, I've made this game Entwine. I maybe want to share it with the world or with people, but I don't really know where to start. Do you? Yeah.
I honestly, I've noted, like, sometimes, like, in my free time, I'll, like, just search around with sort of like resources for people who are just like starting out in games, and it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that it's very scattered. For the most part, if someone has like a game and they want to like, and they if they have trouble finding people to play it, I just tell them, send it to me. Send it to me. I'll tweet it out to people. I'll tell people, like, I'll play it. I'll tell people this is something that needs to be played. If they don't know how to upload it to itch, it's fairly easy, but there are resources out there. But if they need help, I'm more than willing to help them. Like, I have a lot of time now.
Sure.
So I could say that with but I want to make sure that their voices are heard. I don't like if it's easier for me to just be like, hey, I have like half an hour, you want to put your game on itch, I'll help you. Let's work something out, and I'll help you do it. We can do this together. I don't want your story to get left behind. I don't want you to get left behind. I don't want your story to get left behind. Like, these are like things I'm like really passionate about, and it makes me so angry when people, they have like this game and it's like something they really care about, and they give up. I can't.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of cool and inspiring that a lot of this is a kind of grassroots or like individual, kind of movement by yourself and maybe others to do whatever you can to lift up voices of these like independent, like individual marginalized creators. I mean, I hope that in time, we see more like established like frameworks, maybe with funding from like from publishers and studios and big corporations to kind of seek out this talent and give it a platform more actively, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It makes, so like, even in terms of like having like a platform, there are like so in order for me to like, I've never done a talk at GDC. I've done talks at like GamerX. I think I've done a talk. I've done talks at like Indiecade, and like I've gone to like so many at PAX. But like, even in terms of like people who are just getting in the industry and they have like a story to tell, and if they get these opportunities from these huge companies that run these events to talk about their workflow, talk about what influenced their stories, and they don't pay them, and that is so, oh my god, it's like it gets me so furious, because it's like, you have like, you can look at the sponsors of all these like huge organizations, and they all got money, and when they have like someone who doesn't have a lot of money and has to like every time it's sponsorship season, everyone's just like rushing and be like, I hope I'm chosen, and like the most that they get out of it is just like a ticket. And when you share your story, you share your workflow with all these people, and they don't have like money to give you like that. That's fucked up. Honestly, I hate that. And then like we come from hand-eye society where well, we mostly get like grants from the government, but we still have the ability to um pay people who submit their work to us, and like it makes us so happy that we're able to give back to the community. And you have these like $1 million companies who are out there, like all selling thousands of tickets from like all these sponsors, and like no one, like they don't give a shit, and like they don't like pay their speakers their worth. And it's just like it makes me so upset. And like so many people, so many people I've talked to just give up. They give up on games, they give up on the whole industry, and it's just like there's no change, just no change. And it's like what why
Yeah.
why are you asking for all these stories and games, and you won't even give them a chance? You won't even give them like even like $100. You'd be like, oh, like for talks we're giving out like $100. Like, no, you get nothing. It's like, yeah, you get exposure, but like we all know like what am I going to do with exposure? Exposure can't really pay bills. Exposure can't really do much in terms of like development and getting like the tools you need that are like they're not like open source or free. And it just makes me so mad that like honestly, I dare GDC, I dare PAX, I dare all these like organizations to pay people what they're worth, pay for their games, pay them for like speaking, pay them for anything. Honestly, give them the tools they need. They need like they're competent. Honestly, that's it.
Yeah. No,
They're competent.
absolutely. And I mean, there is no. I get very, very frustrated and angry myself with the ways in which it seems to me that a lot of the big, very wealthy companies and organizations in video games pay lip service to issues of representation, and they do things that for PR, they might sponsor events, as you mentioned, to kind of make it seem like they're advocates and they're supporting these kinds of initiatives and movements. But really, when the rubber hits the road, when you get right down to it, they're not compensating people, and they're not, and that results in a system where the people who have more money and time to begin with, who are largely straight white men, or they are more likely to have those privileges in that time, are remain at a significant advantage and remain like in those positions of to produce the work that then a lot of times goes on to get the most kind of attention. So yeah, I think we all need to do whatever we can in whatever ways we can to really advocate and push for a shift in terms of how the games industry functions around these
100%.
issues, right?
Yeah. It's just like I don't know. I'm just so tired.
Sure.
I'm just so tired. I don't like what I'm seeing. There's so many opportunities out there for I just I can't. It's it's definitely something that's fixable, but like we need to pressure these organizations and be like, you can do better. You can do so much better.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess let me take a couple of questions maybe from chat. These are sort of questions about like the craft, I guess, of narrative, if you don't mind. So one we have from Kurosawa for the win 7. They ask, like, I studied writing at film school. What are some good resources for aspiring games writers? I mean, I guess we mentioned Twine already as like a really great tool to just kind of get your hands dirty and mess around with and try all kinds of interactivity. If you want to see like what you can do when you shift from a linear or non-interactive story like a film story to an interactive story with player input and everything. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on like resources or things you might encourage people to look into?
Honestly, I feel like Twine is like a really good basis for a lot of folks. It could do a lot of people that I know have used Twine for non-game related projects as well. So if you want to if you want to do like a layout and see how something would look, you could definitely use Twine for that. So it could definitely translate into film as well. So you could have like opening and you lead that into, different sort of events that would happen like throughout film and like what would become of those events. And you could definitely break off in terms of like those kind of narratives as well. Yeah, so like film, games, highly recommend checking out Twine. It's it's very accessible. Everything you could publish to HTML, which could run on literally any browser. If you have like, a phone from like the 90s that has that the browser still works, has Wi-Fi or something, Twine games will work on it because it's HTML. I've played so many games on my DS just by logging onto the Twine website and just like downloading those games and like playing them with my with the stylus. It's so easy to use. Highly recommend it. It's free. If you know anyone who's like even remotely interested in games, or just even just like layouts and seeing like how things will look, highly recommend Twine.
Awesome. Yeah, Twine is, I think it's really great to see tools that put the power of creation in people's hands, right? People who maybe previously wouldn't have had the money, the resources to create a game. Obviously there are still so many barriers there, but Twine is something that a lot of people can access and can use to
Exactly.
to create their own games. So Arc F2 asks, is there a narrative theme or arc that has inspired you in your writing for games? I guess, yeah, or like talk a bit maybe about, like, I mean, you mentioned earlier your game, I'm Fine, like, or what were maybe your goals just narratively with that game, or with
For I'm Fine, it was mostly I wanted to, talk about mental health that I haven't really seen discussed in games. The only other game that kind of sort of came around the same time was Depression Quest, which was made by Zoe Quinn, that really like influenced me and be like, it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to talk about those sort of themes, and like understand that anyone who goes through those kind of things is not alone, and their stories deserve to be heard, shared, like discussing it with other people so they have like a better understanding of like the things that you go through, the things that others go through, and ways that you could help those people a lot better in terms of getting to know them, getting to know things about them, how they live, how they work, etc. So it's just something that I think a lot of people should focus more about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it to a lot of it's interesting because like when Unfine was came out and I showcased it at I'm not sure how long ago that was, but I showcased it at GamerX. Um, there were a couple of people who played it and they cried, which
Sure.
is which is definitely not a thing that I expected my game to do to a lot of people emotionally. But like after talking to the players about uh, like what do they think, and like just like having that empathy, that line of empathy open, just like discussing the game, a lot of people shared aspects of their life that was like very inspirational to me. And I love those conversations. I love talking to people about like how they feel about games, how the games make them feel, and how they relate those experiences from games into real life, and like how they move forward. It was pretty amazing. I've never thought I could make a game that could do something like that, And I feel like the more games that I make going forward, I do want to have an element of mental health, how the character, like reacts to it, how they live with it, and how they move throughout their life. But yeah, I think mental health is one of the bigger things that I think games should explore.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, it has been heartening to see games you do that more, in recent years. But I feel like that's definitely something that, that we could see more of. And it's anyway, as I've said, it's kind of a really exciting time to be in games narrative. But it's also a time where I think a lot of the old rigid kind of limits that are coming into clearer focus, and we're realizing, games really have kind of locked a lot of people out for a long time, and not told all kinds of stories, and hopefully we can kind of keep chipping away at those barriers,
exactly.
right? And creating more space for more identities and more kinds of stories in games. Well, Rokashi, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate your time, your perspective, your passion around these issues. And as you've said, I think folks can also tweet you if they have maybe a game that they are curious, maybe want to get more eyes on, or they want to know, as you said, how to get a game up on itch.io, things like that. So thank you for all the work you do in that space. I think that's gonna do it for us. Although, don't go away yet, folks. Anita, I believe you're out there somewhere. Take it away.
Hello. That was so delightful. Thank you so much, Carolyn and Rokashi, for having that awesome chat. We're really excited to bring more games-focused conversations into this space. I want to thank all of our mods for keeping this space friendly, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. You can watch this video anytime, or any of the Good Tips for Hard Times videos, at youtube.com/gameshotline. Also, we have a hotline. Isn't that cool? If you are in the US and want to reach out for emotional support, please do. It's here for you if you make or play games, or just need a little bit of emotional support. If you want to help us keep the hotline going, keep the show going, there are many ways that you can support us. You can do that through donating. You can do that by subscribing to us here on Twitch. You can spread the word, which is really one of the biggest ways that you can really support us, is to just tell everyone you know about the hotline, about the show, making sure that we get this into as many communities as possible. And also, if you want to do some live streaming for us, or charity streaming, that would be amazing. You can learn more about all of these ways of getting involved at gameshotline.org. Please join us next week when I will be talking to Sarah Amale about labor organizing and workers' rights in the games industry, which I'm really excited to dive into. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.